You know that moment when you realize your just friend status with someone might not be as clear-cut as you thought? Yeah, that hit me like a ton of bricks a few weeks ago. I never saw it coming, mostly because I was so sure of the lines we drew between us. But apparently, my straight best friend, not so much. So here's the deal. I'm Alex, 27, living in this cramped but cozy apartment in Brooklyn. I've been friends with Jake since we met in college, and honestly, he's been the brother I never had. We do everything together. Late night pizza runs, bad movie marathons, even that weird obsession with vintage vinyl. Jake's straight through and through. At least that's what we both always assumed without ever really needing to put it into words. Now, I'm gay, and Jake's been super supportive since day one. He's the kind of friend who's always had my back, no judgment, no weirdness. We've never danced around feelings or anything beyond friendship. I mean, that was until I met Marco. Marco's the kind of guy you notice the second he walks into a room. Tall, dark hair that's always a little messy, this smile that's more charming than it has any right to be. I met him through a dating app, something I hadn't really tried seriously until recently. Marco's not from around here. He moved to New York a few months ago for work, and we hit it off immediately over coffee and way too much dessert at this little place in the East Village. The thing is, I was really into him. Like, actual butterflies, nervous excitement, maybe even a little hope. I told Jake about Marco pretty early on, mostly because that's just who I am. I don't hide things from Jake, and he was cool about it, like always. We joked about me finally getting a boyfriend, and him having to share his best friend spot with someone else. So last Saturday, I finally had my first real date with Marco. We planned to meet at this rooftop bar downtown, the kind of place with fairy lights and a view of the skyline that makes you feel like you're in a movie. I was buzzing with anticipation, texting Jake about it during the day, expecting the usual, "Go get him, dude," or something supportive like that. But what I got instead? Silence. Then, a few hours later, a message that was weirdly vague, like, have fun or whatever, followed by a one-word reply when I told him I was on my way. I shrugged it off. Jake's always been a bit aloof sometimes, especially if he's stressed at work or whatever. The date went great, by the way. Marco was the perfect mix of funny, kind, and a little mysterious. We laughed until our sides hurt, talked about everything from bad reality TV to our childhood dreams, and there was definitely a spark. I got home feeling lighter than I had in weeks. But then, the next day, Jake was different. Not just a little distant, but like he was holding something back. When I brought up the date again, trying to share how it went, he just gave me this look, half annoyed, half hurt, and said, "So, he's real then?" It hit me like a punch in the gut, because that question wasn't about Marco being real. It was about something else entirely, and suddenly I started wondering if maybe Jake's feelings for me weren't as straightforward as I thought. The friend I trusted the most might actually be the one feeling jealous. That day was the start of something I never expected. A shift in our friendship that made me question everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and what it really means to be best friends. And honestly, I still don't know where it's all going. But I do know one thing for sure. Things are about to get a whole lot more complicated. I stared at Jake like he'd suddenly sprouted a second head. "What do you mean he's real then?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but inside I was already scrambling to make sense of what I was hearing. Jake shrugged, looking away like the question embarrassed him. "I don't know. I guess I assumed you were just messing around or something. Like maybe you were just talking to a guy online, not actually going on dates. It feels different seeing you with someone real." He ran a hand through his hair, the way he always does when he's uncomfortable. Different how? I pressed, stepping closer. I wanted to reach out, but didn't want to push him. The tension was thick in the room, something unspoken hanging between us, and it wasn't the usual easygoing vibe. Jake exhaled, then laughed nervously. "I don't know, man. I guess I thought I was the only one who really knew you, you know? Like, before you started dating. I'm not great with this guy stuff. Never have been. But seeing you with someone else, it's weird. Feels like I'm losing you or something. Losing me? That hit hard. Jake's always been my rock, and the idea that he felt displaced by Marco stung more than I wanted to admit. I opened my mouth to say something, but the words tangled up in my throat. It was the first time he'd said anything remotely close to jealousy, and suddenly, it felt like we'd crossed some invisible border in our friendship. That night, I lay awake thinking about what Jake said. I kept replaying his words over and over, trying to understand where the jealousy was coming from. Was it because he secretly wished things were different? Was he scared of losing me? Or maybe, just maybe, there was something more beneath it all. Over the next few days, things between us grew strangely tense. Jake was quieter, less willing to hang out like we used to. When we did meet up, our conversations felt clipped, and he kept checking his phone like he was waiting for something or someone. One evening, I decided to confront it head-on. We grabbed burgers at our usual spot, a greasy little joint that smelled like nostalgia and fried onions. I figured it was as good a place as any for serious talk. "Jake," I started, trying to sound casual. "Are you okay? You've been off lately." He looked up from his fries, eyebrows furrowed. "Yeah, I'm fine," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Come on, man. I know you better than that. You don't have to pretend with me." He sighed, then finally dropped the fork. "All right, since you're pushing, I'm jealous." "Not of Marco." "Exactly. I mean, yeah, maybe a little, but it's more about you. I don't like seeing you with someone else because I'm scared that things between us will change." I swallowed hard. It was weird hearing this from him, but also kind of a relief. At least now we were talking about it. "Jake, you're my best friend. That's not going to change. Marco's great, but you're the guy who's been there through everything. It's not like I'm replacing you." He gave me a half smile, but there was sadness in his eyes. "I know. I just hate feeling like I'm not enough." That hit me in a way I didn't expect. "Jake, you're more than enough. But feelings don't always follow logic, do they?" He shook his head, then laughed softly. "No, they don't." After that night, something between us shifted again. We started spending more time together. But now there was this undercurrent of something unspoken, something electric that neither of us wanted to name. It made me wonder if Jake's jealousy was just the surface of a deeper feeling, one that he might not even fully understand yet. Then came the day I invited Marco over to meet Jake. I figured it was time to bring them together, to face whatever weirdness was brewing head-on. Marco was nervous but upbeat, and Jake was reserved. Watching them in the same room was like watching a slow-motion collision. Jake smiled politely, but I caught those little moments, his eyes lingering too long on me, the way his posture tightened when Marco laughed at something I said. After Marco left, Jake was quiet. I asked if he wanted to talk, but he just shook his head and said, "I'm fine," but I wasn't convinced. Something was definitely going on beneath the surface. A week later, it all came to a head. We were sitting on my couch, the usual spot for late-night talks, when Jake suddenly blurted out, "Why do I feel like I'm losing you?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the vulnerability I'd never noticed before. "Jake, you're not losing me. You're my best friend. But you have to be honest with yourself. Are you jealous because you love me, or because you just don't want things to change?" He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Maybe it's both." That admission was like a punch to the gut and a breath of fresh air all at once. I realized then that the line between friendship and something more was blurrier than I'd thought. And maybe, just maybe, Jake's jealousy was the start of a whole new chapter for us both. But where that chapter leads, I'm still figuring that out. And honestly, I can't wait to see what happens next. After Jake's quiet confession, the room felt heavier, but also strangely lighter, like we'd lifted a weight off our chest we didn't realize was there. I didn't know exactly how to respond at first. I mean, I always knew Jake cared about me, but hearing him admit maybe it's both changed everything. So I just reached out and gave his hand a squeeze. "Hey, I'm here, no matter what." His eyes softened, and for a second, the tension cracked wide open. But then, just as suddenly, Jake pulled his hand back and looked away. "I don't want to mess this up," he said, voice low. I nodded. "Neither do I. But maybe the first step is just being honest, really honest. No more pretending this is just friendship if it's not. Jake looked like he was wrestling with something inside, and I wasn't sure if the moment was too much or just right. Finally, he gave me a half smile. Yeah, maybe. The next morning, things felt different but fragile. We still texted and hung out, but there was this new layer, this unspoken question in the air. What do we actually want from each other? I decided I needed to get some clarity, not just for me, but for Jake too. So I invited him out for brunch at that little cafe where we used to go in college. Cheap eggs and bottomless coffee. Nothing fancy, just us. When I picked him up, I could tell he was nervous. He kept adjusting his jacket and checking his phone like he was expecting a call from outer space. I tried to keep things light, joking about how we were basically two old dudes reminiscing about the good old days. But Jake was quiet. Finally, as we sat with our coffee steaming between us, I asked the question I'd been turning over in my head. Jake, what do you want? From us, whatever us is. He took a deep breath, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, I want to see if there's more than just friendship here. I want to try, but I'm scared it'll ruin everything. His honesty hit me hard, but it wasn't shocking. I'd felt the same fear creeping in, but hearing it out loud made it real. I want that too. I like Marco, but you've been my constant. It's scary to think about changing all that, but maybe it's worth it. Jake's smile was small but genuine. Worth a shot, huh? Worth a shot. I agreed. We left brunch feeling like we'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross, but in a good way. The days that followed were awkward, amazing, confusing, and exciting all at once. We started spending more time alone, figuring out what this new dynamic meant. One night, we watched old movies on my couch, and when Jake reached for my hand, I didn't pull away. That simple touch said more than either of us could put into words. Still, it wasn't all smooth sailing. I invited Marco over again, this time with Jake's knowledge, and the tension was thick. Jake was polite, but the way he tensed when Marco laughed at me or glanced in my direction told me he was struggling. After Marco left, Jake and I barely spoke for a while. One night, Jake finally broke the silence. I don't think I can do this, he admitted. Trying to be both your friend and whatever this is, I'm messed up. I understood. It was a lot to ask of him, to balance feelings that had been bottled up for years with the reality of my new relationship. I told him, we don't have to figure it all out overnight. We take it one step at a time. He nodded, but the pain in his eyes was real. Then came the day Jake told me he'd been thinking about his own feelings more seriously. He said he'd always considered himself straight, but with me, it was different. He wasn't ready to label anything, but he was willing to explore what that meant. I felt my heart race at that. Here was my best friend, the guy I had trusted for years, opening up in a way I hadn't expected. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once. We made a pact to be honest, to communicate, and to not let fear drive us apart. That meant sometimes there were awkward conversations, sometimes there were misunderstandings, but mostly there was a new kind of closeness. One evening, after a long day at work, Jake showed up at my door with a bottle of wine and a nervous grin. Thought we could talk, he said. We sat on the floor, sipping wine and opening up. Jake confessed he'd been scared of rejection, scared of ruining our friendship, but more than anything, scared of what his feelings could mean. I told him I felt the same fears, especially about hurting him or losing what we had. But I also said something I meant, I don't want to live with what ifs. I want to see where this goes. He smiled, and for the first time in a while, that old ease returned. The kind of ease that comes from knowing you're with someone who truly gets you. So, yeah, things are messy and complicated and kind of terrifying. But I've learned that sometimes the people you think are just your best friends might actually be the ones you're meant to love. And maybe jealousy isn't just about envy. It's about realizing how much someone means to you. I don't know exactly what the future holds for Jake and me, but for the first time, I'm okay with not knowing. Because whatever happens, we're in it together. And that feels like enough, for now. The days after that wine-fueled conversation passed in this strange, wonderful blur. Jake and I were finding our rhythm, slowly, carefully. It wasn't like flipping a switch. It was more like learning to dance together, stepping on toes sometimes, but eventually starting to move in sync. One Saturday afternoon, a few weeks in, Jake showed up at my place with that goofy smile I'd known forever, but this time it felt different. He had a six-pack of beers and this old board game we used to play in college. I knew what was coming. "We need to do this," he said, plopping down on the couch. "For old time's sake, and because I'm betting I can still beat you." I laughed, feeling that familiar warmth bubble up. "You're on, man. Prepare to lose." We played for hours, the kind of easy, competitive banter that felt like the foundation of us. But somewhere between rolling dice and trash talk, Jake got quiet, looking at me with those big, honest eyes. "Alex," he said, voice soft, "can I ask you something?" I raised an eyebrow, already guessing it was going to be serious. "Shoot. Do you think this thing between us, that it could work? Like really work? Or are we just caught up in some weird in-between?" I thought about it for a moment. "Honestly, I don't know. But I do know that being with you feels right. More right than I expected. And I want to see where it goes, even if it's messy." Jake nodded slowly, relief washing over his face. "Me too. We didn't define anything that day. No labels, no promises, just two best friends exploring something new, fragile, and thrilling." But, of course, the complications didn't stop there. Enter Marco. He'd been quiet on the sidelines, which was understandable. I hadn't exactly made this easy for him. When I brought Jake around again, there was an awkward tension none of us could ignore. Marco was polite, but I caught the way his smile faltered when Jake and I shared a look that said, "This is complicated." One night, Marco and I sat on my balcony, the city lights glowing around us, and he finally brought it up. "Alex, I don't want to be the guy who comes between you and your best friend," he said carefully. "But I also don't want to lose what we have." I sighed. "I don't want to lose either of you. I'm figuring this out just like you." Marco smiled, a little sadly. "Just promise me one thing. Be honest. With both of us." I promised. That honesty led to some intense conversations between the three of us. We had to navigate all the messy feelings, the jealousy, the uncertainty. Marco was amazing in his patience, even if I saw moments where he looked hurt or frustrated. Something else happened too. Jake started opening up more about his past, about how he'd always seen himself as straight, not because that was all he was, but because it was simpler, safer. Now, with me, he was realizing that identity isn't a box, but more like a spectrum. One evening, we were all together at my place after dinner. The mood was light, but then Jake got this look on his face, like he was about to say something important. I paused my music and gave him my full attention. "I've been thinking," he started, "about how scared I was to admit any of this. To admit that maybe I'm not just straight Jake, and about how much I care about you, Alex. More than I thought I could." My heart was pounding. "Jake," he smiled, a little sheepishly. "I'm not saying I know what this means yet, but I want to keep figuring it out, with you." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "Me too." Marco sat quietly, then nodded. "I'm glad you guys are talking. Whatever this is, I want to support it." That night felt like a turning point. For the first time, it wasn't about competition or jealousy. It was about connection and honesty. Still, the path ahead was anything but clear. Jake and I had to figure out what kind of relationship we wanted, and how Marco fit into the picture. There were moments of doubt, of awkwardness, of fear that maybe things would fall apart, but there were also moments of pure joy, the kind that come from discovering someone who sees you, really sees you, and still chooses to stay. One afternoon, Jake and I took a walk through the park near my apartment. The leaves were just starting to turn, and the air had that crisp edge that signaled fall was coming. We talked about everything: work, dreams, what we wanted from life. At one point, Jake stopped and looked at me seriously. "I'm glad you pushed me, to be honest. I think I was hiding from how much I care about you." I smiled. "Me too." He reached for my hand, and this time, I didn't hesitate. We walked like that for a while, fingers intertwined, feeling like maybe we were exactly where we were supposed to be. There's no neat ending yet to this story. No perfect resolution or clear path forward. It's messy, complicated, and sometimes scary, but it's ours. And honestly, I wouldn't trade it for anything. A few days after that walk in the park, Jake and I found ourselves sitting on the worn-out couch in my apartment, the one piece of furniture that had seen every stage of our friendship, from late-night video game marathons to heart-to-hearts about life's messiest moments. Only now, there was this new weight between us, an electric charge that neither of us wanted to ignore but weren't sure how to address. Jake was fiddling with the hem of his shirt, and I could tell something was on his mind. Finally, he looked up, eyes searching mine. "Alex, can I ask you something? Kind of stupid?" I grinned. "Nothing you say is stupid, man." "Shoot." He hesitated, then blurted, "Do you think us, could really work? I mean, not just as friends, but, more?" It was the question I'd been dancing around for weeks, but hadn't quite voiced. I felt my heart thump a little harder. Honestly, I don't know yet, but I want to find out. With you. His face softened, like a weight lifted. Me too. We both laughed quietly, the tension easing. It felt like the first time we were really acknowledging what was there, the possibility of something new and fragile. But just as we were starting to explore this new territory, Marco called me. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it I hadn't heard before. "Hey, can we talk?" I told Jake I'd be right back and stepped outside. Marco's apartment was quieter these days. He'd been giving us space, but I knew he was trying to figure out where he fit in all this. "I've been thinking," Marco said after a long pause, "about us and you and Jake. And I don't want to be the guy who complicates things or makes you choose." I sighed. "It's complicated, yeah, but I'm not about to choose between you and Jake. It's not like that." He chuckled softly. "I know it's not simple. I just want to understand what you want." I hesitated, then said, "I want to be honest. With you, with Jake, and with myself. I don't have all the answers yet, but I want us all to be part of this journey, however that looks." Marco nodded, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something hopeful in his eyes. "Okay, we figure it out together." Coming back inside, I felt a strange mix of relief and nervousness. Jake looked at me expectantly. Marco and I talked. I said, "I want us to figure this out together. No secrets." Jake nodded slowly, and though the path ahead was still uncertain, I felt like maybe we were starting to build something real. Over the next few weeks, we tried to navigate this new dynamic like it was some kind of unwritten rule book we had to figure out as we went. There were awkward dinners, late-night talks that stretched into dawn, and moments where jealousy bubbled up like an unwelcome guest. But also moments of laughter, shared vulnerability, and the kind of connection I'd never experienced before. One night, after a particularly intense conversation about what we all wanted and needed, Jake pulled me aside. His eyes were serious but tender. "Alex, I don't want to lose what we have, but I also don't want to hold you back. If being with Marco makes you happy, I want that for you." I shook my head. "Jake, it's not about holding anyone back. It's about finding a way for us all to be happy, and I think we can." He smiled, but there was a hint of sadness there too. That night, as I lay in bed, my mind was a whirl of emotions. Love, friendship, jealousy, hope, everything tangled together in a way that was both terrifying and exhilarating. The next morning, Jake surprised me by showing up at my door with coffee and that goofy grin I loved. "Thought we could start fresh. No pressure, just us." I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Sounds perfect. We spent the day wandering the city, talking about everything and nothing. At one point, Jake stopped, looked at me, and said, "Whatever this is, I'm glad we're doing it together." "Me too, Jake. Me too." That day with Jake felt like a breath of fresh air, like a reset button on everything that had been tangled and messy between us. We wandered through the city streets, the kind of aimless stroll that somehow makes the world feel smaller and more manageable. The sun was dipping low, casting a warm glow over the pavement, and for once I wasn't overthinking every word or gesture. We stopped at this tiny ice cream shop we'd discovered in college, the one with the weird flavors like lavender honey and black sesame. Jake ordered a double scoop of mint chocolate chip, his usual safe bet, and I went wild with a scoop of salted caramel and another of pistachio. Sitting on the bench outside, licking melting ice cream, Jake nudged me with his shoulder. Remember when we used to come here after finals? We'd be exhausted, but somehow still happy. I smiled, the memory pulling me back to those simpler times. Yeah, we were just two idiots celebrating the end of torture. Jake laughed, and suddenly his expression softened. Alex, can I be honest? Always. He looked down for a second, then met my gaze. I'm still scared. Scared that opening this door will change everything in a way we can't fix. I reached over and took his hand, this time not hesitating. Me too. But maybe some things need to change to become better. We can't stay stuck in the past because it's comfortable. He squeezed my hand back, and in that moment, I felt like maybe we were both ready to take the leap, whatever that meant. A few days later, things got unexpectedly complicated. Marco called me out of the blue, sounding more serious than usual. Alex, can we meet? I think we need to talk. We met at a quiet cafe in the village, the kind with mismatched chairs and the smell of fresh espresso lingering in the air. Marco looked nervous, fidgeting with his cup. I've been thinking about you and Jake, he admitted. I don't want to be the third wheel or the reason you two grow apart. I reached across the table, resting my hand on his. I get it. I don't want to lose what Jake and I have, but I also don't want to lose what we have. It's complicated, but I want to figure it out. Marco nodded slowly. I'm willing to try if you are. The honesty between us made the tension ease a little. I realized none of this had to be an either-or situation. Maybe love didn't have to fit into neat boxes or defined roles. That night, when I told Jake about the conversation, he took it surprisingly well. If Marco is willing to be part of this, then I'm willing to try too, as long as we keep talking, and no one feels left out. We all agreed on that. Communication was going to be our lifeline. Over the next few weeks, we experimented with this new dynamic, cautious but hopeful. There were awkward moments, like when I caught Jake staring at me a little too long during dinner with Marco, or when Marco seemed hesitant to voice his feelings. But there were also moments of pure magic, shared laughs, late-night texts, and that feeling of being seen by more than one person, in different ways. One evening, after a long day, Jake and I found ourselves alone on my balcony, the city lights twinkling below. He pulled me close, resting his forehead against mine. Alex, he whispered, thank you for being patient with me. I'm still figuring this out, but I'm so glad it's with you. My heart swelled. Jake, I'm the lucky one. You've been my anchor through everything. We stayed there for a while, wrapped in each other's arms, the world fading away. But life isn't just moments like this. There were challenges ahead. Friends who didn't understand, moments of jealousy that flared up unexpectedly, and the constant balancing act of emotions. Once, after a night out, Jake admitted he felt insecure when I talked about Marco. It was raw and honest, and instead of brushing it off, I held him close and told him how much he meant to me. I'm not going anywhere, I said. I'm in this with you, however it looks. He smiled, tears glistening. I know, and that means everything. Slowly, day by day, we built something new. A relationship that wasn't defined by labels or expectations, but by trust, honesty, and a willingness to embrace the messy, beautiful reality of us. Some nights when I lie awake, I think about how far we've come, from just best friends to something deeper, something that scares me and excites me all at once. And even though I don't have all the answers, I'm grateful for this journey. Because with Jake by my side, and who knows, maybe Marco too, I'm learning what it really means to love and be loved in return, and that, more than anything, feels like hope. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when everything finally felt settled. Jake and I were sprawled out on my couch, the sunlight pouring through the window, casting a lazy glow over the room. Marco had stopped by earlier, and the three of us had shared an easy, laughter-filled dinner, the kind where no one was competing for attention and the awkward edges had softened into something comfortable. Jake looked over at me, that familiar warmth in his eyes, and I realized how much I'd missed this, the quiet companionship that had defined our friendship but now held a new kind of depth. He reached out, brushing a stray curl from my forehead, and I caught his hand in mine. You know, he said softly, this feels right. Messy and complicated, but right. I smiled, squeezing his hand gently. Yeah, I think we're figuring it out. Together. It wasn't a fairy tale with a neat ending. We didn't have everything perfectly sorted out, and there were still moments of uncertainty. But there was trust now, a shared understanding that whatever came next, we'd face it honestly, with open hearts. I thought back to that first date with Marco, the confusing feelings, the jealousy, the fear. And now, here we were, not perfect, not simple, but real. We'd navigated the tangled mess of friendship and love, learned that sometimes the lines blurred, and that was okay. Jake and I weren't just best friends anymore, but something more. And Marco, with his quiet patience and kindness, was part of this unfolding story too, even if the path wasn't always clear. As I leaned into Jake's touch, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. For friendship that could bend without breaking, for love that challenged me to be brave, and for the messy, beautiful truth that sometimes the people you least expect become the ones who mean the most. No matter where this all leads, I know one thing for sure. We've already won by being honest, with ourselves and each other. And that, more than anything, is what makes this worth it.